So what is attachment? A lot of people, we hear that word. It's probably not new to you. And yet it's probably one of my favorite things to talk about with people and to incorporate in just conversation, everyday conversation, as well, of course, just what I do for a living and workplace conversations. But ultimately, I think it's really helpful just to do a brief overview of what is it? Like, what is it really? And it's an emotional and a biological bond, right? It happens on so many levels. Of course, attachment is built in those early years of life, especially those first handful of months of life, right? But with this bond, and it's more than a bond, right? I honestly think we struggle to have the right language for attachment because the depth of it is more than what bond can capture. But it happens on a biological level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, of course, a relational level, emotional, biological, all the things. So we get that. But also we know that why it's important, or part of why it's important, is that it functions as a foundation for the rest of our lives, as our foundation of how we relate to others, of how we get our needs met, of the ways we make decisions, the types of decisions we make, our ability to make them at all, our ability to ask for our needs to get met, to connect with others, to be vulnerable, to trust others, to finish what we started, to try new things. Again, this is so foundational for all of that and more. And so that's really why I think it's worth having that conversation and learning about it. One, for ourselves, because we as adults, we have attachment styles, but also as little ones, right? As we are equipping our little ones with a strong, secure attachment for their future. If our attachment maybe was a little insecure, didn't look so great, probably something for us to look at, because we know that we are going to care for others the way we received care, whether that was good, bad, or ugly. All right. And so attachment provides security for the things we experience today and forward in our lives. A couple features of it, again, we know that it really is primarily formed and developed early on in life. And these rhythms, like changing a baby's diaper, like singing them a song to sleep, like bathing them before bedtime, like rocking them for their naps, like patting them and burping them after feedings themselves. All of these, what might feel like mundane, day-to-day, hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute things with an infant, that is where attachment is formed. That's when it's developed and built. Because when you think about a tiny newborn, and their brain and their body is like a major sponge. I mean, it is absorbing and developing so much and so rapidly. And so that is why those first couple years of life, and up to about those first 3 years of life, when the brain is developing, when their body is growing and absorbing, and all these things are forming, that is why those first few years of life is so crucial for our attachment style being developed and our attachment to a caregiver. However, I will say, I get this question a lot. Well, what about if I have a 15-year-old and, maybe attachment was not so great early on? Or what if I'm a 46-year-old and my attachment is real wonky? The reality is our attachment is impressionable throughout our lives. Now, part of that is because we also know the brain is plastic. Our brain can rewire, but also our hearts, our souls, like we can experience new things if we have the right tools and availability to seek that out and do, honestly, some pretty hard work on that. So I always want to mention that if attachment wasn't so great early on, whether it's for you or for someone that you love, it doesn't mean you're hopeless. It doesn't mean you're going to be stuck like that forever. It just means let's learn about it as much as we can, and identify what some growth areas are, what some healing areas might be, and seeking out those tools to do that work, because it can bring a lot of fruit. We can really change the tide with attachment too. So That's why I think attachment's so important. It applies to every single one of us. No one's exempt from an attachment style, right? Because we were all raised by someone, by some other human who was raised by someone else, right? We were raised by these other individuals who have attachment styles. And that impacts, the attachment impacts our ability to feel known by someone else. What did that look like? To belong to and with someone else, as well as really to kind of know and belong to ourselves also. So there's a lot more to attachment than just, it's a bond, right? It happens on really deep levels, but some of it is formed in really simple moments. And so that's why I love learning about and having these conversations, because it's not just cut and dry. So I hope that helps for those of you who know that language, you've heard of attachment, like you generally get the idea, but maybe want to dig a little bit deeper. Most certainly a lot of my content is oriented to attachment, because when I was in grad school and I learned about this, all the light bulbs went off. It made so much sense to me. And so I hope through this material, it starts to make a little more sense to you as well.